So much for tuning into WHYY. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent, co-host of Studio 2, and this is a Studio 2 Extra. A lot has changed for Chris Coons in the last 12 months. A year ago, he was the junior U.S. Senator from Delaware. Today, after the retirement of Tom Carper, he is the senior. A year ago, he was working with the president in Joe Biden, who was among his closest political allies, a man he once interned for in the U.S. Senate. Yep. Today, his party is squarely in the minority, and he confronts a White House that seems to offer little common ground. So, where does he and his party go from here? And that's what we hope to learn today. Senator Chris Coons, welcome to Studio 2 at WHYY.
Thank you, Avi. Great to be on with you.
So, there's been so much chatter recently about this vote over the spending bill and the split within the Democratic Party. Folks probably know that you voted, you did not vote for that bill. I'm less curious in your reasoning for that vote and more what you take away from that split moving forward, because you've talked in the past about the need for unity. So how do you find unity again?
So earlier this week, I joined with my colleagues in the Delaware Democratic congressional delegation. So Congresswoman Sarah McBride, Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester, the three of us went to the Wilmington Hospital. This is Christiana Care's main emergency room hospital in downtown Wilmington. And we did an event about Medicaid with patients, caregivers, families, physicians, nurses, to talk about the impact of a massive Medicaid cut on Delawareans. There's a quarter of all Delawareans directly benefit from Medicaid, whether it's in childbirth or caring for a disabled child or substance abuse or mental health treatment or aging with dignity. And so the thing that unites all Democrats is opposition to the bill Republicans are moving through the House right now that would cut $800 billion out of Medicaid. Most Americans don't really know exactly what Medicaid and Medicare are and exactly what they do. So we're trying to engage and educate our state in why a deep Medicaid cut would be harmful. That's what we're going to see as the unifying message for Democrats going forward, and it's the fight of the next couple of months.
You're talking about preserving the social safety net. That's going to be the unifying thing. But you also talked about making sure Americans understand what that safety net is made of, and that involves reaching people. I'm just curious if you think Democrats have the right tone and the right message right now, because sometimes I feel like people just hear white noise.
Well, it's hopefully not just white noise in a moment when we are trying to defend the diversity of the Democratic coalition. Hopefully we're speaking out of the strength of our diversity and the backgrounds of all the different folks who are members of the delegation in Delaware and the coalition that makes up the Democratic Party. I did two other things this week that were designed to help advance that common message. One was to meet with the union that represents everybody who works at the Veterans Administration in Delaware. They are concerned, even alarmed, about cuts to the workforce at the VA. Yeah. It is a unifying message to say we're going to stand behind our veterans and support them.
Because that's where it gets personal for people.
Absolutely. My guest to Trump's address to Congress several weeks ago was a two-tour combat veteran, a Marine, who was working in conservation in Delaware, Maryland's Eastern Shore. He was abruptly fired in an email claiming it was for cause with no cause. His firing was about as cruel and abrupt a way as you could dismiss someone, and that this combat veteran was fired that way. I've gotten a lot of feedback from Delawareans who heard or saw some of the stories about his being my guest that made them say, we understand that we ought to have federal programs that are efficient and that are aligned with the priorities of the American people. But firing people at the Veterans Administration, firing veterans who are working for the federal government, slashing Medicaid, these are things that all of us can stand against.
One thing I noticed recently, actually on your Instagram feed, is that it felt like it was starting to get a little looser, in some ways a little more direct, with a little more edge. Yep. There was even a video recently where you dropped a bleep word. Is that strategic? Do Democrats need to be, for lack of a better word, a little edgier?
Yes. So Cory Booker who's a friend, and he was a mayor when I was a county executive. We've known each other for years. Senator Booker of New Jersey is the new leader of the Democratic Senate caucus sort of messaging operation. One of the ways we got our butts kicked in the election last year was in not connecting with YouTube, with influencers, with new media.
I don't qualify as an influencer, by the way, but I take your point.
And one of the things that I saw as I was campaigning around Pennsylvania, around Ohio and Michigan and Arizona, there was no Trump ground game. They didn't have local offices. They didn't have people going and knocking on doors. They didn't have yard signs and lit pieces. It was all on this. It was all on social media. And it's no mystery that the world's wealthiest man, who owns the most influential social media platform and who contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump's campaign, also played a central role in engaging and mobilizing younger voters. Democrats have lost the edge that we historically had in connecting with voters of color, with younger voters, with voters who are interested in fighting their way into or advancing in the middle class. We are seen as an elite coastal party.
Status quo party.
Status quo party that is defending the establishment rather than the party that's making our country a country of opportunity and of inclusion and a country we can all be proud of.
I think your diagnosis is spot on. I guess the question is, how much is it about just being on these platforms? Because, Democrats are on social media. They're on YouTube. They're on X. I wonder if it's as much about being on those platforms is how you sound and how you present on those platforms. Because, look, you have a master's degree in ethics from Yale Divinity School.
I do.
And by the way, I personally think that's an amazing thing.
Right.
But then sometimes I feel like it prevents politicians like you from saying truly what's on your mind with the most force possible, because you're trying to be a good person, a conciliatory person.
Yes.
I mean, I would struggle a lot with this. Are you struggling with this right now?
So I've never forgotten the first time I ran for office. My friend Jimmy Paoli looked at my campaign pamphlet that I had 2 infant kids. I was, writing it myself on my home computer late at night. And he looks at I can't repeat what he said about it. It was pretty vulgar. He says, you can take that thing and you can wipe your butt with it, basically. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, on the back, it's got you went to Yale. He goes, nobody wants to hear you went to Yale. I said, well, but he goes, got it. Your mom wants to know you went to Yale. Good for her. He goes, if you didn't go to UD or Widener or Westchester or Dell State, nobody in Delaware wants to hear about you got a chemistry degree from Amherst College. And that was a blunt reminder to me that people want to know what my values are, what I'm going to do for them, and how I care about and connect with them. They don't care about how smart I am or how educated I am or what my experiences are. Like, this is not a resume interview. This is a heart interview. And every election is a job interview. You're asking people to hire you to fight for them. And so the first thing they want to know is, do you get them? Right? So yes, I did not historically post a lot on social media about the Eagles. I'm an Eagles fan. My wife is a maniac Eagles fan. We follow Notre Dame, Penn State, and the Eagles. And I sort of didn't think that was relevant because, yes, I am mostly a policy guy. And one of the things my very capable communications team has been saying is, you got to let people know, like, talk about Scrapple, talk about the stuff that you ate growing up. Talk about, Fetterman, in no small part, got elected because he got the Sheets versus Wawa fight.
And he wears shorts, and hoodies.
He wears hoodies to the Senate.
And I think that's the tough part, too, because I feel like what you're talking about is letting people know who you are, a lot of the positive attributes. Unfortunately, I think what we have seen, not just from the right, but a lot on the right, is in addition to that, basically a bluntness and times just a meanness. And it gets a lot of attention.
And that's a values issue that I feel strongly about.
That's the line you just feel like I can't cross there.
So 2 things. First, I could show a lot more about who I really am if I included my family, because I've got 3 kids. And my wife, I respect deeply that starting when they got into middle school, she was like, we got to keep our kids out of this because they deserve to have their own lives and be their own people. But if we spent 10 minutes talking over a cup of coffee, 2/3 of what I'm going to talk about is my kids.
Yep.
Because that's the very center of my life. That's who I'm fighting for. That's who I care about. I love them and I want them to have a better future. And that's a lot of what moves me in my public service. The other is my faith. I did not talk about my faith for much of my elected life.
But recently I saw you with Tim Kaine talking about Lent.
I'm doing a Lenten series.
Yeah.
Brian Stevenson is a Delawarean who runs the Equal Justice Initiative in Alabama. I was just with him for the 60th anniversary of the March across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. And I did things with the pastor of Bethel Church in Birmingham and with Brian Stevenson in Alabama and with my colleague, Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester, where we talked about how our faith sustains us in a really difficult moment and why hope and a focus on justice and righteousness is what we take out of our faith. Yeah, there's some folks who may find that offensive and think I shouldn't be sharing that. But if I'm going to be in any way authentic, you need to know more about who I am and what I care about and what moves me. First. Second, I think our country's in a basic fight over whether we are a country that is about cruelty and selfishness or about compassion and inclusion. This is either a we're all in this together country, or this is a I'm getting mine and to hell with you country.
Yeah.
And my father, who was a white Protestant guy from Boston, said to me over and over that his time as a sergeant in the Army was the first time he became an American. It was the first time he understood America because he was responsible for a platoon of guys in Germany who were from the north, from the south, east, west, who were Jewish, who were Catholic, who were Protestant, who were black, who were Latino, who were white. And he said, I never really got this country until my job was to take this dozen guys and get them to all move in the same direction and do the same thing under tough circumstances. And I've held on to that for a long time. This is a country of people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds. We are a multi-faith, multilingual, multi-ethnic democracy that was founded on an idea, not a geography or an ethnicity, unlike much of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And it only holds together if we focus on the things that bring us together. If we have a president and a national politics that is just about cruelty, picking on people, dividing people, and fighting with people, we turn into a nation of the Jerry Springer show, where we're all just throwing chairs at each other.
And of course, you got to start in politics, right? And there is definitely there's a conduit between those two things, and the fear that I have as someone who would like to believe in that vision of compassion and inclusion is that in a social media age where attention is the scarcest resource, cruelty just wins in the end. Cruelty and selfishness kind of just has the inherent upper hand.
It's not just an inherent upper hand. It's fueled by algorithms.
Fair enough.
And so one of the things that we are trying to legislate on in a bipartisan way that we have really struggled with is to rein in the massive power of social media, because algorithms that are these complex mathematical formula that are designed to attract us and hold our attention, feed things that are corrosive to our society.
Well, they lean into the worser of our angel, or the devil on our shoulder. That's the one that it's weighing heavier on in the algorithm, right?
That's a choice.
Yep.
One of the most striking things I remember hearing was that TikTok is different in China than it is in the United States. That the algorithm that drives TikTok in the PRC is oriented towards respecting authority, studying hard. It feeds up positive stories about Chinese nationalism and the role of the party. And in the United States, it feeds up stories that are divisive, that are enraging, and that get your sort of inner anger. So, look, that's just a characterization. I'm sure I'm going to get calls from folks who are TikTok fans. But at the end of the day, children are harmed on social media. I am convinced as a parent that things like Instagram and Facebook and X and other platforms feed personally harmful images and messages, and the consequences for the mental health of young Americans, particularly girls, particularly of high school age. Yeah. The last Surgeon General documented and spoke about a lot, and we are trying to find ways
Yep.
to expose those algorithms to research. So I have a bill called the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, PATA, that is designed to allow academic research into these algorithms and what they are actually doing to us.
Transparency. Yeah.
Because my gut tells me that they're harmful, but we don't have the science yet because they're all concealed behind corporate, trade secrets.
It's a black box. I mean, so before we let Joe, this was actually I did not intend to spend all the time that we did on this, but only because it's really interesting. But I can't not talk to you a little bit about foreign policy.
Sure.
You've been on the Foreign Relations Committee for 15 years.
15
now.
years.
Boy, talk about an area where the bipartisan consensus seems to have just collapsed. I want you to take us to the day of President Zelensky's visit to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
You met with him in the morning, correct?
Yes.
Lindsey Graham was there.
Yes.
Along with other senators. Then he goes to this Oval Office meeting in front of the press with President Trump and Vice President Vance.
And Secretary Rubio.
Fair point.
Performative, disruptive, disrespectful.
I think deeply offensive to you too.
Yeah.
Like this strikes at something in your core.
Yep.
This hurt you to see this.
Yep.
Did you talk to Lindsey Graham later that day?
Yep. Actually, not that day.
But later,
I couldn't.
subsequently.
Yeah, we talked subsequently.
Because this is a person I think for many years you had a lot of common ground with.
Mm-hmm.
You were happy to work together with on many foreign policy issues. Not all of them, but there was common ground.
Sure.
Is there still behind closed doors common ground between you and someone like a Senator Graham?
Look, so thanks for the question. I'll try to give a concise answer. There were 10 of us who met with President Zelensky before he went literally across the street. We were at the Hay Adams Hotel. And it was a united message of support to him. And to jump ahead, a bipartisan group of 8 of us, so 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, gave a floor speech in support of Ukraine last week. So that bipartisan consensus in support of Ukraine has not dissolved. But when supporting Ukraine requires any criticism of President Trump and his conduct, that has fallen away.
Why? What are the Republicans so scared of? Is anyone getting primaried because they said something nice about Zelensky?
No, which is how we were able to get 8 of us on the floor saying something nice about Zelensky. But saying something harsh about Trump, maybe. And Elon Musk is a malign force in Republican politics because he's hovering right there over the shoulder of anyone who thinks they might vote a different way than what President Trump wants. And he is threatening to promptly, massively fund primaries against people who, for example, might have voted against the CR.
So that's the fear.
Absolutely.
It's Musk and his money.
And voters.
And voters.
Republicans are afraid of their own primary voting base, which, that is how politics work. You don't come back if you lose your primary. And Lindsey Graham is up for re-election this time and may very well face a tough primary. But Senator Graham would tell you if he were here, I don't speak for him, but after a lot of conversations, he and I have disagreed vigorously on Supreme Court nominees, on tax policy. I fundamentally disagree with the bill he's moving through the Budget Committee as budget chair. But in the last Congress, we worked very closely together on funding USAID. We wrote the bill together in the Senate that funded USAID. So it has been really hard for me to be able to look him and Secretary Rubio in the eye after they have largely stepped aside and allowed DOJ and Trump to just devastate the foreign aid infrastructure that we built with organizations like Catholic Relief Services, Bread for the World, CARE, Save the Children, World Vision. These nonprofits that are American-led household name nonprofits have been decimated. And children are dying as a result of these abrupt, illegal, and unkind cuts to our assistance in the world, which was less than 1% of our spending. Senator Graham still believes in the power and the importance of foreign aid, but I don't see how the actions of the Trump administration in any way align with that.
Real quick, before I let you go, this is going to be a tough one to answer, but behind closed doors, what percentage of your Republican colleagues in the Senate do you think at their core still believe in this idea of America as the leader of a global alliance that includes Canada and Europe and a lot of our traditional allies? What percentage do you think still believe that? And what percentage are sort of, even at their core, their ideological core, so on board with the new MAGA sort of view of the world that they, even behind closed doors, don't believe that anymore?
Right. I'd say it's about 2/3 who still have a Reagan Republican, Bush Republican view that our alliances make us safer,
Yep.
that we should continue to be in NATO, that we should
2/3 behind closed doors, you think, still?
still believe that.
Wow.
Look, Trump's nominee to be NATO ambassador said, "Oh no, President Trump fully supports NATO."
Right.
But that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, the speech by Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference was breathtaking.
Yep.
A huge departure from American non-interference in domestic politics in Germany.
Yep.
I mean, he met with the AfD leader, the far-right party, after delivering this speech that was essentially a thumb in the eye to our European partners and allies. There is a hard-right group that shares JD's view, Vice President Vance's views, who do think that we should be withdrawing from alliances. This is the America First view.
Yep.
There's probably a third for whom this is their private. They'd really rather be back to Reagan's America, peace through strength rather than weakness through chaos and withdraw. And there's a third that are still saying it publicly.
Yep.
That, I mean, Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell of Kentucky, is only a senator for 2 more years.
Yeah.
And he is public. He's writing editorials. He's giving floor speeches. He's casting votes saying he opposes Trump's isolationism. But as the former leader, you know, his reach and his influence in his caucus is waning.
And of course, he does not have to fear a primary anymore.
Correct.
Well, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. That is Chris Coons, the senior U.S. Senator from the first state, the great state of Delaware. Thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you, Avi.